Imagine a war so fast, so brutal, so one-sided that it was over before most people even understood it had begun. 100 hours, that's all it took. 100 hours for the most powerful military force ever assembled in human history to crush one of the largest armies in the Middle East. But the story of how America got there, the betrayal, the invasion, the ultimatum, and the desert storm that followed, that story is far more incredible than most people know. This is the Gulf War, 1991, and it changed the world forever. August 2nd, 1990, 2 o'clock in the morning. The people of Kuwait were sleeping. Then the ground started shaking. Over 100,000 Iraqi soldiers and 700 tanks crossed the border in the darkness. Saddam Hussein, the iron-fisted dictator of Iraq, had just ordered the invasion of his neighbor, Kuwait. By sunrise, it was over. Kuwait had fallen in less than 12 hours. Now understand what this meant. Kuwait was one of the richest oil-producing nations on Earth. With Kuwait under his control, Saddam Hussein now controlled 20% of the entire world's oil supply. And his army was now sitting right on the border of Saudi Arabia, which held another 25%. If Saddam took Saudi Arabia next, he would control nearly half of the world's oil. The global economy would be in his hands, and Saddam Hussein was not a man who could be trusted with that kind of power. The world had a decision to make, fast. President George H.W. Bush picked up the phone. He called king after king, president after president, prime minister after prime minister. In the weeks that followed, Bush assembled something the world had never seen before, a coalition of 35 nations, Muslim countries, European countries, Arab neighbors, all agreeing on one thing: Saddam Hussein had to get out of Kuwait. The United Nations gave Iraq a deadline, January 15, 1991, withdraw from Kuwait completely or face the consequences. Saddam Hussein looked at the deadline and laughed. He called it the mother of all battles. He said American soldiers would drown in their own blood. He warned of casualties so massive that America would never recover. He had the fourth largest army in the entire world, 1 million soldiers, thousands of tanks, chemical weapons he had already used on his own people. He was not bluffing, but neither was America. January 16, 1991, one day after the deadline. Baghdad, Iraq, 2:30 in the morning. The city was silent, dark, calm. Then the sky lit up. Operation Desert Storm had begun. For 38 straight days, the United States and coalition forces unleashed the most intense aerial bombardment in the history of warfare. Over 100,000 air missions, stealth bombers that Iraqi radar couldn't even detect, Tomahawk cruise missiles flying through city streets, literally turning corners, hitting targets with pinpoint precision the world had never seen before. CNN was broadcasting it live. The entire world watched in real time as Baghdad burned. Saddam fought back. He launched Scud missiles at Israel, trying to drag Israel into the war and break apart the Arab coalition. He set Kuwaiti oil fields on fire, 700 oil wells burning simultaneously, turning the sky black for months. But nothing could stop what was coming. February 24, 1991, 4 o'clock in the morning. General Norman Schwarzkopf, the commander of coalition forces, launched the ground invasion. And here is where Saddam made his fatal mistake. He expected the attack to come straight from the south, from the Kuwait border. He positioned his best forces there, dug in, waiting. But Schwarzkopf had been planning something else entirely. While Saddam was watching the south, coalition forces had secretly moved hundreds of thousands of troops far to the west, deep into the desert, into the middle of nowhere. And when the ground invasion began, those forces swung east like a giant left hook, cutting directly behind the Iraqi army, surrounding them, cutting off their escape. Iraqi soldiers had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The Iraqi army, the force Saddam had called unstoppable, began to collapse within hours. Soldiers surrendered by the thousands. Some surrendered to journalists. Some surrendered to unmanned drones. One group of Iraqi soldiers tried to surrender to a pizza delivery guy who happened to be driving near the border. They were done. They were finished. 100 hours after the ground invasion, President Bush appeared on national television. Kuwait is liberated. Iraq's army is defeated. Just 100 hours. The coalition had liberated an entire country, destroyed the fourth largest army in the world, and suffered fewer than 300 combat deaths. Iraqi casualties estimated between 20,000 and 35,000 soldiers dead. It was the most lopsided military victory in modern history. General Schwarzkopf's left hook, the plan nobody saw coming, is still studied in military academies around the world today. But here is the question that haunted America for the next decade. When coalition forces had Saddam's army completely destroyed, when they could have driven straight to Baghdad and removed him from power forever, they stopped. Bush stopped the war at 100 hours. Saddam Hussein stayed in power. The decision was controversial. Bush argued that the mission was to liberate Kuwait, not to invade Iraq, that going to Baghdad would have shattered the coalition, that it would have created a power vacuum impossible to fill. Others said it was the biggest mistake America ever made, because 12 years later, in 2003, America would go back to finish what was left unfinished, and that war would last not 100 hours, but 20 years. The Gulf War of 1991 showed the world something it had never seen before: the precision, the speed, the overwhelming power of the American military machine. But it also showed something else, that winning a war and solving a problem are two very different things. Saddam Hussein was beaten in 100 hours, but the instability he left behind, the questions he left unanswered, those lasted for generations. Was stopping at 100 hours the right call? That question still has no easy answer. If this story hit different, subscribe, because the story of what happened when America went back to Iraq in 2003, that story is even more complicated and even more devastating. See you next time.